21ാം നൂറ്റാണ്ടിൻ്റെ മറ്റൊരു ലക്കത്തിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം. ഇന്ത്യയിൽ 2023 നവവർഷം തുടങ്ങിയത് പാരിസ്ഥിതികമായ ചില ദുസ്സൂചനകളോടുകൂടിയാണ്. 21ാം നൂറ്റാണ്ടിലെ മനുഷ്യജീവിതങ്ങളുടെ മേൽ മാത്രമല്ല, ഭൂമുഖത്തെ എല്ലാ ജീവജാലങ്ങളുടെയും മേൽ ഉണ്ടാകുന്ന ഒരു പ്രതിസന്ധിയിലേക്ക് വിരൽ ചൂണ്ടുന്ന ഒരു പാരിസ്ഥിതിക പ്രതിഭാസം ഇന്ത്യയിൽ നവവർഷത്തിൻ്റെ ആരംഭത്തിൽ തന്നെ ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഹിമാചല നഗരമായ ജോഷിമഠിൽ, ഉത്തരാഖണ്ഡിലെ ജോഷിമഠ് നഗരത്തിൽ, അത് സമുദ്രനിരപ്പിൽ നിന്നും ഏതായ 6150 അടി ഉയരത്തിലുള്ള നഗരമാണ്. ഈ നഗരത്തിൽ 700ഓളം വീടുകളിൽ, വണ്ടികൾ പോകുന്ന വഴികളിൽ എല്ലാം വിള്ളലുകൾ കാണുകയാണ് ഉണ്ടായത് ജനുവരി മാസം ആദ്യം. അത് വലിയ ദേശീയ പ്രാധാന്യം ആ വാർത്തകൾക്ക് ലഭിക്കുകയും ചെയ്തു. അത് വലിയ ഒരു പാരിസ്ഥിതിക ദുരന്തത്തിലേക്ക്, ദേശവ്യാപകമായി നാം സൂക്ഷിച്ചിരിക്കേണ്ട ഒരു ദുരന്തത്തിലേക്ക് വിരൽ ചൂണ്ടുന്ന ഒരു പ്രതിഭാസമാണ് ജോഷിമഠിൽ കാണുന്നത്. ജോഷിമഠ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഒരു പ്രവേശന നഗരമാണ്, പല കാര്യങ്ങൾക്കും വേണ്ടിയുള്ള ഒരു പ്രവേശന നഗരമാണ്. വലിയ തീർത്ഥാടന കേന്ദ്രങ്ങളിലേക്കുള്ള പ്രവേശന നഗരമാണ്. പർവ്വതാരോഹകർക്ക് മുകളിലേക്ക് പോകുവാനുള്ള ഒരു പ്രവേശന നഗരമാണ്. മലകയറ്റക്കാർക്ക് ഉള്ള ഒരു പ്രവേശന നഗരമാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് വലിയ പ്രാധാന്യമുള്ള, പലതരങ്ങളിൽ പ്രാധാന്യമുള്ള ഒരു നഗരമാണ് ജോഷിമഠ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ വലിയ വികസന പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളാണ് നമ്മൾ നടക്കുന്നത്. ഈ ടൂറിസം മാത്രമല്ല, വലിയ ഹൈഡ്രോ ഇലക്ട്രിക് പ്രോജക്റ്റുകളും വലിയ ടണലുകളും, കിലോമീറ്ററുകൾ നീളമുള്ള ടണലുകളും എല്ലാം ജോഷിമഠിൽ ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഇതെല്ലാം കൂടി ഉണ്ടാക്കിയ ഒരു പ്രതിഭാസമാണ്, ഒരു പ്രതിസന്ധിയാണ് ഇപ്പോൾ ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് സംസാരിക്കുവാനായി 21ാം നൂറ്റാണ്ടിൽ അതിഥിയായി എത്തിയിരിക്കുന്നത് രജനീഷ് സരീനാണ്. 23 കൊല്ലക്കാലമായി ഈ മേഖലയിൽ പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്നയാളാണ്. പാരിസ്ഥിതിക, അതായത് സസ്റ്റൈനബിളായിട്ടുള്ള നഗരവികസനവും ഇത്തരം മേഖലകളിലുള്ള ഭവന പദ്ധതികളുമായിട്ടും സ്ഥായിയായ ഭവന പദ്ധതികളുമായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിൽ ഏർപ്പെടുന്ന അദ്ദേഹം ഡൽഹിയിലെ അതിപ്രശസ്തമായ സെൻറ്റർ ഫോർ സയൻസ് ആൻഡ് എൻവയോൺമെൻറ്റിൽ പ്രോഗ്രാം ഡയറക്ടറാണ്. അദ്ദേഹമാണ് 21ാം നൂറ്റാണ്ടിൽ അതിഥിയായി എത്തിയിരിക്കുന്നത്. അദ്ദേഹം അമേരിക്കൻ എംബസിയുമായും ബ്രിട്ടീഷ് ഹൈക്കമ്മീഷനുമായും വേൾഡ് വൈഡ് ഫണ്ട് ഫോർ നേച്ചറുമൊക്കെയായി സഹകരിച്ച് പ്രവർത്തിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളയാളാണ്. വലിയ പ്രവൃത്തി പരിചയം അദ്ദേഹം ഈ മേഖലയിലേക്ക് കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നുണ്ട്. വെൽക്കം രജനീഷ് സരീൻ ഫോർ ദിസ് പ്രോഗ്രാം. Rajneesh, there is no doubt that the emergency evacuation of residents from Joshimath and the around in Uttarakhand region is giving a national wake-up call vis-a-vis our perspectives on the developmental activities in this area and in the country as a whole. What is your immediate reaction or substantial reaction to the present crisis being immersed in Joshimath and around?
If I try to summarize this in one word, I'll say this may not be even called as a climate issue. This is like a man-made cascade which has been developing and emerging in front of us. This is like an overlook of, to great extent, the early warnings which were coming to us. And somewhere you will say that it's somewhere a composition of lot of things which has gone little way ahead of the balanced approach which we generally call as sustainable development in this. So this is something which largely is the first take which comes in our mind for this.
Let me invite your attention to a governmental study which happened in 1976, if I remember correctly, on the impact of such development activities in Uttarakhand and especially in Joshimath area. Do you think that the planners and the governments learned any lessons from this report? And what were the principal findings in that report?
See, honestly, when you look at the stretch where Joshimath is, or largely if you look at this Char Dham network which is there, so what is the celebration which we do here? It's a riverine ecology celebration which is there. You traverse along Ganga, or maybe the Bhagirathi and Alaknanda around with that, and try to understand the various confluences and the things, how the complete riverine ecology emerges in front of you. So we do see a mighty Ganges running right in front of us, and there is huge amount of water resources interlinkages which are on a display here. So there is no doubt the reports which has been there in the past as well as what is there in they are trying to indicate you in the direction. There is a huge amount of hydro geomorphological relationship which exists in these spaces in much more knitted way as compared to in any of other locations. Now, the moment you touch across any of these elements, definitely there is a repercussion and issues which start emerging. The reports which were there in the past as well as the indications which we are receiving now. In fact, there was a release of remote sensing and other data also recently where they're talking about, yes, there is a substantial amount of sinking which is happening, and science could now even resonate to the results which are now showing up in front of us. Yes, so there are linkages, and certainly there was, that's why there were early warning sign, I said they were there, which we somewhere we overlooked. See, there is, if you largely look at, there is established system which is called environmental impact assessment, which do work, we do have a science which operates around that. But unfortunately, what we do not have with us is a cumulative environmental impact assessments with us. Now, for example, one project, when it's cleared, the clearance is given with regard to the background information of environment which is there. So every environment has its own assimilative capacities which is there. So when you put one project in proportion to the environment background condition, the project gets cleared. So when you put the second one, independent of the first, again it gets cleared. But when you put, there are 10 such projects which must have got cleared with the similar kind of environmental background which is there with you. But when you put these 10 together as a cumulative, now what happened is Joshimath is a cumulative impact of multiple level of development projects which might be happening in vicinity around it. And that's where things goes wrong. So we do not have a format which can explain this much better in terms of that how to assess a cumulative impact into such a fragile ecosystems. That is something which needs to be worked at in our country. See, we cannot judge and comment on the report until the report is right in front of us. Definitely there are concerns which always happen, but there is a committee which review all this. But largely what happens is there is a system or a system in place which is there. Now, a review is done and is based on whatever the conditions and explanations which is provided. So it's a very structured way of clearing a process where you understand what are the extrapolations which are going to happen, what are the changes or environmental issues and concerns will come, what are the management practices which will be followed for that, not to going beyond the hand, or how we're going to manage it in case something happens. Even it talks about certain more elements of, like in case something goes beyond your limits, then where to stop and what to not, what are the monitoring procedures, you know. So there is definitely the huge amount of, you can say, the documented science which is there behind that. But the kind of thing which mushrooms now around in Joshimath is that we have a gross, you can say, negligence which has happened, as well as in the things which graduated all along, in terms of the, you can say, the development which happened over the period because of the expansion which is happening in town, as well as the increased attraction toward this town, which is now coming up emerging. Like, for example, it was pilgrimage earlier. Now it's a huge center of tourism also. And with increased accessibility and with easy access which we provided to these, you can say, the fragile ecosystems, people are rushing to these locations much faster. If I take an example, during COVID, the capacities which were allowed was 1,800 persons per day. Right? Now, when we internalize human health as one of the very prominent and important factor, we only allowed 1,000 to 800 people visiting per day in that shrines. Today, when the COVID was not there this year, look at the figures which were there. It was running into 1,000, multiple of 1,000 people visiting that shrines or the places in one day. Now, so if the health makes a kind of a concern, we definitely have a carrying capacity which is being worked at. But when environment is there, why not we work according to the carrying capacity of the ecosystem which is there? That becomes a major question which is around in this area. And the answer lies here.
Please tell me why we are unable to have a check or keeping the cumulative impact of such disturbances.
See, honestly, the solutions lies in, like, when you remain sensitive to the environment which is around you. Like, for example, so if I take an example, the nature, you need to learn to work around with nature or live with nature or design with nature. So unfortunate part is that we are not giving any space to nature. If you actually go to Joshimath, the inch by inch land is like totally developed. Forget about the drainage systems, the other things, the water, how it's going to pass through and all. There's not very well thought of kind of structures which exist over there. It's like even when you look at that kind of construction typologies which are happening, it's totally concrete penetration which has happened here, which is may not be even to the hill architecture and philosophy. So when a tourist comes to certain remote areas or anybody who's visiting there, he needs to soak with the local requirements and culture. But unfortunate part is we bended towards the need and requirement of tourists more and gave them what they wanted rather than giving them what nature wanted to give it to them. And that's where the balance has gone beyond the limit of repairs. See, there has been always a burning question with regard to the riverine ecologies about the environmental flows, what will happen if you have multiple projects which is there. That is something which was a visible thing, which is like you see on surface, you see a reduced water and you understand it very well. Now what goes underground, that is something which is not visible, right? We don't know much about it. So, and moreover, if we know in the science, normal persons cannot even understand it. They can only make a guess around it. That's what is happening right now also, right? The people are saying there is more discharge of water which is happening, or there are water or the muddy water coming or something like that. So there is all, you can say, the escalations of thought which is there in the mind of people, but there is no clear thing which they can make a judgment of. But riverine ecology, they can easily make a judgment that water is there or not there. And this kind of condition has developed over the period when multiple projects has been set up onto the river. And definitely we know that when we do not work in a cumulative impact assessment analogy in our mind, these kind of things start facing and we start getting these kind of results in front. So it's a fight between what is visible and what is not visible and how you reach to the balance of it. That's something which needs to be worked at.
In the beginning, you have already said that there are two aspects for this phenomenon. But let me ask very clearly, you know, there are two aspects for the entire phenomenon. The first is the huge infrastructural developmental activities which are happening in Joshimath and around, in Uttarakhand as such, in the entire Himalaya regions. Without understanding the possible outcomes and impacts of such developmental activities. The second thing is, as a force multiplier, the climate change, which is a global phenomenon, whether the climate change is also playing a role as a force multiplier in Joshimath.
See, what we've seen last year or in the past years in the similar ecology, little or maybe a few kilometers ahead of Joshimath, we have seen the devastation which has happened through climate change. So that is, climate change always, whenever or the vulnerabilities, when they are pushed to a corner, there is sometimes an element of surprise which comes to you. Sometimes you're not prepared for it, or it graduates in front of you, or rather it shows up sometimes the clear indications to you. Now this Joshimath case is well documented. So for example, the research which you are mentioning or the research before that, or in fact I was going through the document which even existed in early 90s, which talks about how fragile this ecosystem is and how it is developed over the period, how the young mountains and what are the spots where you should develop, where you should not develop, where you can have a density of you can say agglomeration of urban activities and where you should not have. So these are all very well documented facts which are there in front of us. Now the only disadvantage is, or you can say the disadvantage which has happened to Joshimath is just outside the very fragile ecosystem where we do not allow anything. Maybe you can say that after the bioreserve, this is the only closest spot where the densification of population could have happened, and that's what the Joshimath is receiving all the ends from it. So be it's like multiple reasons accumulating all the, you can say then whatever the negative and positivity of all that has got assimilated into Joshimath together.
This particular program, 21 Nutandi, is being watched by the general public in Kerala. Just for their understanding, can you just explain what do you mean by the word young mountains?
See, for example, Aravallis, when we are in Delhi, these mountains are like very old. Now they are at a different age of it. When you can say the mountains emerges, like Himalayans are the younger one. When we look at within the India, these are the young mountains. Now, when there is a young mountain, the behavior of the nature of that ecology is altogether very different because it keeps changing according to the. So somewhere when it comes to Aravali's and all, these are like more stable one. You know what is going to be there. Yeah. So these are more like, you know the nuances very well. You have lived with it for a very larger period. You do not. So the behaviors and the changes and as well as the variations which are they are different as compared to what is there in the younger ecosystems, or you can Himalayas, which we are talking about at this stage. So that's where. So there is a push which is going up, and as well as the pressure which is coming from the top in terms of development. These two conflicts happens in the younger, and that's where they ask you not to touch or avoid certain zones, and that's where the philosophy lies around. And I think they have multiple reports has already mentioned that what are the location, how Joshimath becomes one of the prime center for all these. And I don't need to get into details of it, but yes, there are facts around that. See, honestly, long time, I'll say a decade back philosophy, because there were certain reports which were there. The Himalayas becomes, you can say that there are the least socioeconomic costs which are there for hydroelectric projects. And that there was a fascination of bringing more hydroelectric power, and country needed those because that's where the peaking load and other requirements are going to be there. So because the displacement cost as well as a lot of other things were least, multiple reports were pushed into the market saying, yes, it's easier and it's more manageable to work in these ecosystems with these kind of developments aspects which is there. But yes, multiplicity, the issue is not about few. The issue comes when you have multiple of them, and multiple of them with a lack of understanding of how in totality they will have and create an impact for you. So it's basically, it's not a storage based, that's why the tunneling is huge here. So it's basically run of rivers, we call it. So here the head rays and tail rays, they take you where the best of the head is available. So there is traverses more as compared to like the other was like storage dam. Storage will have a lot of displacement. This may not have. So there are various such kind of discussions and debates which happened over the period in the country. So which we don't need, I think we don't need to get into it. But yes, there are the issues and concerns only come from it, that what is that or you can sustainable numbers, or what is an ecosystem assimilative capacity and what best we can explore. That is where the balance should have been worked at.
I just want to know about the reliability of the databases in India vis-a-vis the environmental issues. In a recent RBI bulletin, I have read that there is no reliable databases when it comes to the environmental issues in this country. What do you think? If there is no trustworthy database, how can there be a trustworthy roadmap to development?
See, datas are like, I'm not sure the context in which this quote is coming from, but yes, there has been always, when you come to this, you can say the ecology which we are talking about, there is always a lack of data which exists. You have to place your own stations and need to record little more information. So now when you do not have very well established continuity of data available with you, there is definitely you need to have more monitoring and requirements needs to be worked according to that. And in fact, I remember those days when I used to work on glaciers. So we used to set automatic weather stations and other things because the data were not at all available. So now in order to do any kind of corrective decisions or even giving sustainable solutions to something, you require data to be there. Then only you can take a call according to what is required and what should you do and what you should not be doing in those. So that definitely we suffer to some extent. And remote areas we suffer a little more as compared to what may be the kind of spread of information which may be available in urban centers or maybe the agglomeration where we live.
I'm asking a general question to you. Both of us are sitting in Delhi, in the city of Delhi, central Delhi. And the urban world is, expanding its wings in an unprecedented momentum. How do you look at the future generations? Where are we, leading for? And are you an optimist?
See, I think over the period we have been talking about more about efficiencies, and efficiencies has actually taken us to further better, or maybe further better, or maybe more efficient kind of setups more. But I think the answer lies in the way this country, you can say, the vibe of this country is on behavioral. So we have been embedding or bringing up in behavior, which is like a design, which allowed us to work with nature much better as compared to what we are doing now. So we need to bring that kind of a behavioral change. Like if I take example from Kerala, the kind of development and construction which you still do, it's coming up from where? It's the mindset. So mindset and the behavioral will definitely hold a key for what is there in the future. And efficiency will definitely then could be a little more topping up of the requirements which could be done through that. But if we try to see that efficiency will solve all the problem, will not happen. So that's what is the change which we require now. See, every year comes with its own hope. And every time, and we don't, such kind of episode which happens in front of us always gives us an opportunity to turn around and improve the things. So I don't think so this is that bad. It is something, it has given you a caution and a word to you that there is a lot of us, we need to improve our way of working, we need to improve even the standards and codes, how we write it. We need to understand little more complex things and ecosystems which are there around us. Try to see how better nomenclature, standards and behaviors could be worked. And always every year has a hope. This year will also bring up a new hope to us.
How can we equip better policies, keeping the differential impacts of the man-made disasters and the natural disasters in mind?
See, if I go back, Jan again, I think when the Gujarat earthquakes happened, there was no building bylaws at the time. So model building bylaws was something which evolved after that. So there was a problem which we received. This was a natural calamity which we received. And then we made our codes responding to it. And I do have a great hope in this, that in this event which has happened in front of us, we will definitely see a new form of codes and practices emerging, so that we do not see such kind of things getting repeated over to the other towns and establishment as we are pointing out in the start of this.
Thank you, Rajneesh Sarin, for your quality time for 21st നൂറ്റാണ്ട്.
Thank you.